Kia ora everybody. I think we'll start our final session today, final session now. As I said, our final session today is on writing poetry. And we've found that more and more Māori writers are writing poetry or using poetry as a way of exploring all kinds of ideas. And so it's really great to have a poetry panel on today. Today we've got three acclaimed Māori poets. Anahera Gildea, who you've met earlier, is a poet, short story writer, essayist and artivist. She told me to keep that short. Tayi Tibble is from Te Whānau Apanui in Ngāti Porou. She's a poet and writer from Te Whanganui-a-Tara. She's the author of two collections of poetry, Pocahontas and Rangikura, published in Aotearoa by Te Herenga Waka University Press and internationally by NOF and Penguin UK. In 2017, she completed an MA in Creative Writing at the International Institute of Modern Letters, where she was the recipient of the Adam Foundation Prize. Both Pocahontas and Rangikura were shortlisted for the Ockham New Zealand Book Awards, and Pocahontas won the Best First Book Prize in 2019. Tayi's work has appeared in publications such as The New Yorker just recently, Poetry Magazine, Granta, The New York Times, Dazed Magazine, Refinery 29, Harper's Bazaar, Metro, Viva and Newsroom. Essa mai Ranapiri is from Ngāti Raukawa, Te Arawa, Ngāti Pukeko, the Clan Gun and Horwood. She's a person who lives on Ngāti Wairere Whenua and the author of Ransack and Echidna. Essa is a PhD student looking at how poetry by tangata takatapui engages with atuatanga. Essa is co-editor of Kupu Takatapui Literary Journal with Michelle Rahurahu. Please welcome our
Tēnā rā tātou katoa. Really pleased to be here for the first time. No, just kidding. Actually, this is a poetry panel, but what we would like you to do is gather your questions as we speak. What we decided we would do is share with you our poetry as response. So we have organised ourselves to basically share with you a mihi in the form of poetry. And at the end, if anybody has questions or things in particular that they'd like to ask, please have your questions ready. So, I get to start. And our first category, we found that we had thematic things that were similar through all of our books. And we decided that we would mihi to you all in that way. Our first mihi is to the atua. Karopipiti. A genealogy of resistance. First layer from Papatuanuku to the light, Hiniroa Moa, Hini te iwa to the first human who was Hini Ahuone. From red clay to dawn, here she stands breaking, she won't accept it. She becomes darkness, and darknesses become so many lines and issues. Rua putahanga, ngā paritai hinu, thighs ranging across sovereign whenua. Waitohi and rangitopi ora, the heke above, mere and niniwa, the lungs of these maunga, unaiki and waihuia ancestral threads. To our sister outsiders, dangerous allies, the strands of muka, manawahine, e puawaiana, bloom.
You can clap for me, I like it. This poem is called A Karakia for Humble Skunks. I take a bath in my body of water. I know I am the daughter of Rangi Papa Tangaroa and every young god who ever fucked it up before me. Each day I breach the surface cleanly and step out dripping so hard you better call a plumber. God, I'm a flex. I'm God's best sex. I am made in the image of God. I am made in the image of my mother. I am made in the image of my mountain, my river, my whenua. Yes, I'm as fresh as my oldest tupuna. So even when I'm low-key, I'm loud, little but a million years old. I've been germinating like a seed, been on my vibe like an atom, and I'm wilder than anything my ancestors could have imagined. So release the parts of me that call for change, but the energy is stale. I'm switching it all up, fishing stars into the sea and painting the sky full of whales. Keep it humble, keep it scucks, keep it pushing, keep it cute. Be in the marae doing the dishes like there's mahi to do. Creator and creation, I am made of the same star matter as legends. Amini, amini, let's go, let's go.
Kia ora koutou. This poem is called Echidna's Fate and is about the main character of this book, whose name is Echidna, and it's about them meeting Hininui Tibble in the afterlife. The kuia, all dressed in black, standing before an enormous mouth in the earth, waha all the way down. A tuatara sits, eyes lolling at her feet, the hem of her dress sweeping over its cold body. The kuia, all dressed in black, gestures her come, and all Echidna says, before obliging, before taking those short, shuffling movements towards the rest of eternity, is, I've never been.
So our next section is whenua. My response is like kind of a literal response. My poem is called Te Araroa, and it kind of talks about, I was raised in Wellington, and then I was kind of whangai by my sister's family, so I spent most of my youth going back to their marae in Parawira, in the Waikato. But the first time I went back to my lands was like 2015 after my nana passed, and we went to bury her up there. So it's called Te Araroa. And I wrote it during lockdown, so it's got lockdown vibes. Te Araroa. It was a tweet of a bird, a tohunga dream, a tohu in the sky, that told me my iwi would be guarding their tribal lines, and despite having looked my maunga in the eye once, slept only a handful of nights beneath the spine of my tupuna, I felt isolation, real isolation, the feeling of falling and having the wind knocked out of you. This is what I remember. Rising before daylight, but wishing it away. The sun coming up and her lid going on. Uncles fucking up the reo they spent ages scraping together. The heartbreaking habit of looking for her laughing somewhere along the newspaper table. Driving away, and in the rearview mirror watching my whole heart disappear into the whenua she grew up on. No, that she grew up with, not on. Afterwards, my uncles and cousins made forts of driftwood on the shore. I walked by myself through the town, a hall and a foursquare, to a paddock of staunch horses waiting for their kids like school buses, and felt overwhelmed. Overwhelmed by land and the ocean, as far and wide and dramatic and endless as even the mind could even try to hold it. And I imagined living like this, all sea and no obstruction. As I stood with the Pacific all up in my pupils and the breath of whitimataro mourning against my neck, and felt isolation, real isolation, as cold and as brilliant as gunmetal. When I was little, my mother would tell me a story about the people that we were once, and how when the muscle from the north moved in with its mechanical arms of settler fire, we moved up into the motherhood of our maunga for months and months and months. But when the land was plucked over and her teeth sucked to powder, the hunger came with the violence, so violent that we traded and ate our children. Owe, 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 God forgive me, for I used to be so ashamed. When I was little, I cried in front of 60 alien eyes because my teacher told the entire class that Māori killed the moas and let them boo me. Now I think, gets weird, now I think, fuck the moas, up to 10 feet tall, and even like an ostrich is literally freaky enough. What's the bet that they could rip apart even our most savage rangatira apart, but you never see Pākehā on the internet typing, moas killed the Māoris. My killer lives in the other city, said goodbye with an Uber to the airport and a kiss on my skull. As I tried not to cry into my mask, I was reminded of the first time I casually tried to slip some feelings in a text, and he sent back a weak chain of X's. God, I was embarrassed. So embarrassed that I could feel each X like tukutuku beneath my skin, like cuts and crops and kisses and targets, and I was forced to remember that wherever I go, even if I go nowhere at all, that I am still a descendant of mountains and they are still beautiful despite everything they have entertained. Despite everything changing around them, they remain hearty and generous and gorgeous, and ever since they were first fished up by Maui, that sexy scucks, every day, they are the first in the world to feel the sun on their face, and knowing this helps the East Coast girl in me to be brave. Because I come from a line of wilding women, born like Aphrodite in the blood-spilled East Coast Sea. They teach me to live life violently. I've always been the kind of girl too tough to be touched softly. And I come from a line of blazing women, born in the red mouth of the mountains that first kiss the sun. They teach me to live life for fun. I've always been the girl too fire to be handled with care. Actually, I'm air, just like my mother, and I can't be handled at all. I'm a Libra like my mother. As a girl, she kneeled in a valley of teal and let a dozen wild horses stamp a whirlpool around her while her mother screamed silently from the balcony and then gave up and shrugged and left her to it. In the car after the river, Te Kahurere Moa said that in some tellings, Tawhiri Matia is actually a girl. Oh, I said, long and slow, understanding that I understood something that only girls know. That makes too much sense, actually. The bros raging and impulsive, creating earthquakes and tsunamis, stepping out their father and sending him away. What's that ancient whakatoki again? Oh yeah, boys will be boys. But my heart goes out like an abandoned swan boat, ghosting along the lake to Tawhiri Matia, begging everyone to stay safe in the dark love forced upon them. But when Rangi had enough, his duffel bags and the blue Subaru, she went with him to the sky to spend her entire life delivering his mamai to their mother like love letters. In my city, I always forget the wind until I leave it, until I swallow in the window of a foreign city and realise that something is missing, but not quite what.
My poem is about whenua and the ways in which you can have a complicated relationship with it. And it's a response to a poem by Kerry Hume called Silence. She was proposed the question, "Where are your bones?" by Rally Habib, and that's the kind of repeated line throughout the poem. Where are your bones? My bones are inside the house, leaning against a cabinet. It's empty. Where are your bones? My bones are off on a 40-day trip to the desert in hope that it rains. Where are your bones? My bones are in the engine of 1 million motor vehicles all pumping their best chemicals into the atmosphere. Where are your bones? If you take a right turn after the McDonald's, they'll be in the trough with the meat patties. I swear the pigs won't touch them at all. Where are your bones? My bones are drowning inside. My bones, where are your bones? Being used by swimming teams to break into the changing rooms. Where are your bones? The clatter, the hit of my bones rings around the stadium. My bones breaking other bones. My bones breaking windows. My bones stealing televisions and radios and all manner of extension cords. Where are your bones? None of them long enough to connect back to my real bones. Where are your bones? Those bones that karakia, those bones that can stand tall on the marae, them bones that never dry out, that always know what's up when it's up. Where are your bones? My bones are eating my other bones, and those other bones just want to go home.
In response to whenua, I chose to read this poem, which is called Close to the Bone, which I wrote when I was really fucked off. And it's really more to do with whenua as wahine, as well as all the kinds of whenua. Close to the bone. I think you should also know when I first performed this, I performed this topless. Okay. No, not this time. Okay. Close to the bone. Ladies and gentlemen, step right up, step right up. Nau mai haru mai ki tēnei hakari kai tangata kai mana kai ora ora. Titiro ki tēnei tangata take. Te rerekētanga te mea uara. Come one, come all. See the bestial, the exotic, the savage and the strange. Congress of wonders, unclothed curiosity. Linger upon the salted flesh of this living exhibit. Meat cured and preserved, hei whakamomona, hei toenga, delicacies of a lawless orgy. The wild savagery, a craving of tongues loosed by trade winds to binge on the mounds of Papatuanuku. When we are close, I taste your breath, the fetid wash, the greasy palm sweat of dollars, piquant, your thirst wet at the red clay of Kurawaka, an exchange in this peep show of words. Arohia ki te atamira, ki te whakamātaki-taki, ki te reo rōreka. Kawia mai o ka nohi, voyeur. Get your inspiration of specimens, your colours raised on these pawned bones, bones on plinths, boners on display, upright like pricks. Here, in scale model, I tētahi land grab pūrua, plunder the jaw and suckle from its stories. Loot ribs for pendants, for hooks, for earrings. Ravage the long bone patu, seize it, spoil it. Hey product, hey exemplar. Here is organisation by size, a catechism of purpose. Detach the connective tissue, fragment the scaffold of bones that holds this whenua together. Partake in this pageant of the state, its rigid cavities stuffed with indigenous ambrosia. Continue to encounter Cook's savage frenzy. Eat of these words, drink of this karu. Savour my carcass to give depth to your stock. It will prop up the health of your children when they find out the god of a cannibal is a cannibal. Kia ora.
So this next section is in response to home. And this poem's about Kirikiriroa, because that's where I live. And, you know, when you walk past your ex that you don't want to talk to anymore, you have to, it's very awkward. Yeah, whatever. This poem isn't about me, actually.
Lies.
Echidna and Kirikiriroa over the summer. Wades through shallows of the Waikato, not really clean enough to be a part of, doesn't remember how to talk to the river despite their personhood. Fills a VR booth at timeout, killing imaginary things with imaginary weaponry. Pixels splattered apart the whole time she can't escape worries about how she is seen in the world. Does she deserve the leisure afforded her? Leaves without spending the roll of tokens. At browsers, she lies serpentine to check out New Zealand poetry. The shelf of verse hugs the floor, pages sick and yellow. Ute drives to town with her and two others under tarpaulin. They hang out stationary in the back bar while she shakes through her depression. Snake dance in the night. Sees her ex on the way home. Echidna tries her best to ignore the flush red and the eyes like blue drops of water frozen into ice. But says hi, so unfortunately. Straw hair stuck to the side of her face with sweat. Echidna shakes out her dark curls. In response, smirks, waves, but feels black in the pit of her. There is a hole in the ozone, directly above the city, the future of the sky, the future of the sun. She welcomes the warmth for her blood, tamanui dead eyes, and felt so close and so long. Echidna still gets so cold at night. Was she supposed to be good at holding the heat in by now? Sees Rona cradled in the moon. Hard to balance what the body wants with what the body needs. She's the best at beer pong, but only after getting a few away. Needs drunk bright light, the ball plopped in those red cups everyone buys from the warehouse, orders chicken burgers from Hillcrest Fast Foods. Eyes the smorgasbord. Would save her the weird looks if she didn't have to wait for her order. But she waits. It's routine. Thinks about camping at Raglan for the new year. Whose new year is it really? Misses her koro, the ocean, as far as it gets where she is at. Or could you go east and see her Pākehā family? Christmas weirdness huddles around poor Mo'o, giving him stale headlines and quiet judgment. She has to sit with people she loves and swallow racist barbs. We don't get what you've become. No real Maoris left anyway. All evil stems from Zespri or the Indians stealing our orchards. Echidna feels monstrous at the table for lunch. Next to that chill infection, feels like all evil stems from her.
In response to home, I decided that I would read this next poem because this event actually occurred in my house. This poem is called Speaking Rights. My neighbour is learning te reo. Man, he's proud. His long body of white, flicking hair, conquering language. He doesn't feel an inch of guilt. Nothing. Man, he's proud. I've learned my mihi, he says, where you say your mountain and stuff. He struts and tells me his manga and his mona. He can tell me where I'm from, too. He's found a site to trace my whakapapa for me. Shit, that's good. It's all on the internet now, he says. Your iwi, all the way back to your waka. Man, he's proud. Do you know Poye, he says. Prince, what's his name? The big guy. You'd like it. Manakitanga mutes my thunder, eyes wide, short-stepping him out of my whare. Frightening the fuck out of him, beating my drums at him. Who do you think you are? You butcher me 200 years on. You insult my whare, pissing your kōrero everywhere. You represent no one, nothing when you speak. When I speak, my pepeha speaks. I speak with the consent of every single one of my ancestors. She who nursed Koroua through the Pākehā fever, he who married the forbidden, she who swam the rapids to rescue children, they who carried their pou from hikoi to hikoi across the motu, so we could speak. I speak. I call to the mountain that forged shelter for us, the ground beneath that remembers every breath loved here, lost here, fighting right at your fucking feet. Their blood, the stratum, reaching forward into the future, accumulating, hardening into this exact moment, into this very person who matters. It matters what she says. It makes a difference every time. Not throwaway, not nothing, not ever alone. I am held up, infused, risk-taking with the strength of hands who demand, shout, or whisper that I dig in my heels and make them proud. When I do, they surround me, words, thoughts, hearts swell up behind me, feet askance, bodies wide open to the sky, voices harmonizing in waiata that resound, rise up, no longer silent. The bones of Papatuanuku afford speaking rights to all. So good on you for learning te reo. Man, you must be proud.
This poem is called That House. In that house, I lived in a pink lava, watched Lilo and Stitch with my sister at least 3 times a day, delivered kittens in the kitchen and gave them away to neighbours knowing too well that ohana means family, and family means nobody gets left behind even if you want to be forgotten. Something or someone always finds its way back, scratching at the screen door. And in that house with the screen door, I showered with my underwear still on, played piano wet and limply with my eyes closed, escaping up the tree to read all 7 of the Chronicles of Narnia until I fell asleep. And every morning, the sun was as bright and as startling as birth. I developed an early kind of kinship with all the ways the earth hurt. With a toy stethoscope and that lava, I nursed wounds that made me wobbly and only half visible, like a mirage. And in that house with the piano, my mother was a mirror, pretty for as long as she could hold herself together. We wanted to stare, but we were afraid that the pressure could cause cracks. Couldn't tell if she would harden like a diamond or collapse like sand. The moon was in Capricorn, and the man of the house was busy shucking anything he could get at with his machete. Sundays were punctuated with the hack, hack, hack and the nervous rustling of Bibles. Everybody knew what was happening but prayed silently like good disciples. No altars, no candles, no fireplace in that house, so the wood was stacked for the sake of creating something looming, as if a butterfly kiss might send the entire thing tumbling. So we spent whole seasons waiting with our breath dissipating on the insides of our mouths while he was out there huffing and puffing on whatever he could puncture with his teeth. And in that house with no heat, I believed in the cold, thought I would grow old like that piano and have to watch that video forever. But even winter eventually weathers itself, and when the number was finally called, it was spring, and the sprockets of blue and purple were blooming too brightly to politely ignore.
In our next section, we'd like to mihi to our tupuna, or kaumātua. And my poem is called Sedition, which is the title poem of this book. And I wrote it thinking of Mirimanga Kahia. Sedition, a letter to the writer from Mirimanga Kahia. Here's what I had in mind, kōtiro. This clipping at words like overgrown maikuku. Return the blankets of domestic life. Don't fold washing or wear shoes. Polish these rerenga ke. But this world, I suppose neither of us planned to be in politics. Never did do what others told us to. Waha nui though. Go on, get your sedition on, girl. Your agitator, your defiant speak to each other. Eye to eye. Māori have been jailed for nouns, phrases. Butcher up a clause, get buried in Pākehā kupu, then dig that out like the old people. No one approved of their language either.
This poem is called Our Nan Lets Us Smoke Inside. Our Nan lets us smoke inside, but only when we drink wine and play cards on the kitchen table. I feel glamorous when I drop my ash into the power shell in the middle. Our Nan wears black leather pumps and dries wishbones from chicken carcasses in an empty margarine container on top of the fridge. And she's not my real Nan, but I've always wished she was. I wished I was born with her, blood in my veins, her dark Waikato DNA, high cheekbones and heavy wet eyes just like my sister. Our Nan met her late husband in the late 60s. She was dressed in a little mod dress, her black hair flipped. And he was a cowboy with mutton chops and tan-line legs and short cream shorts who rode off to work every morning with a commercial digger for a horse butt. He would pick us up in his station wagon on Sundays, Johnny Cash and his metronome voice making us fall asleep against the dusty window so we would stop. For a fillet of fish and a strawberry milkshake for lunch and for dinner, but he always picked my sister up more. At his funeral, us girls carried the mismatched flowers behind our brothers in black sunglasses. At the service, we all got up and sang, I hope you're dancing in the sky, but it was painful and flat and sounded mostly like coughing. During the burial, nobody exhaled a word as my Nan ashed out a half-sucked cigarette in the fresh, sour soil. And in the car park, we all smoked back tears with another cigarette pacifier like babies numbed on a nicotine nipple.
My poem is called Did Henny Moore Have By Husband Energy? And I don't know, as a Takataupui person, it's always really important for me that we honour the tangata we got that word from. And that's Henny Moore and Tiki and Tūtānakai, who are of this land. And yeah, here's my poem about being a hoe. Did Henny Moore have by husband energy? Spend hours of her day painting little figurines while relaxing in her tie-dye t-shirts she bought from AliExpress, leave one air-free of her headset while playing games with her crew to hear about her Tāne's day, help him with his makeup when going out on the town, whisper and encouraging, go and get them, as he nervously readies to leave the house. Did she awhi her tūtānakai when he was in grief about his lost love, Tiki? I know my partner comforted me when I fell for someone I could not be with, held me in our bed, The bed frame precariously holding our weight, our relationship, the clear effort to keep this configuration of wood stable. She kisses my forehead to sleep and sings me to another world. Did Henny Moore do the same for her lover? Did she waiata his loss into something they could hold together, something they could both sleep comfortably on? This next section is like, we're trying to think of like a kaupapa, and a lot of stuff that we write about is to do with colonization. And so that's what this section is about, and what this poem is about. This is called Echidna is a Cleaner at Night for Miri. Bleach stings in the wrinkles of her knuckles as she's blasting the shit off the walls. The muscle stench, the kaimoana clung too long inland. She's thinking about her workmates and getting drunk on the weekend. Is it Friday yet? The soft giving up of flesh unprickling itself, unwrapped Velcro swell, the black dye that wets the night in cement. The season is running out. The wet kraken drip, draining into the gutters, slopping through the grates. She's pushing the trolley, full of things to clean the world with. And she wears a smile that carries all her ancestors through the good and the bad of an afterlife, held under the Union Jack and some token stars.
Just in case no one's aware, it's an election on its way. Are we allowed to talk about that? No. Okay, great. So I won't talk about that, but I'll share with you this poem, which is called Dog Whistle. And actually, I've read this a few times, and when the audience is really Pākehā, they don't really get the whole poi thing. But anyway, let's see. Dog Whistle. When I first heard your whistle, your here boy, I could have sworn you said poi. Good name for a dog you love, furred and neat in black and white taniko, panting aloud at the swing of hips, the throw of a bone. I wield my poi, code for all the places I've laid my tongue, let my poi travel, long poi, short poi, poi in bars by fires, poi clammy with heat. E poi, chased by so many dogs, rabid and hungry, your whistle, the charm of mouth breathers, billboard promises on unceded land, our post-racial society. Whose dead poi are those? Make them sing, you say. Put some spin on it, girl. The linguistic company we keep is dog whistle semantics. My mother taught me the way, teeth bared and snarling, to fitty-fitty the cord, to bind it by whipping. It's all in the wrist, she said, like flipping the bird. Whirl your poi like verbal nunchucks, send your tongue out marching, and give them their balls on a string.
This poem is called My Ancestors Send Me Screenshots, and it's a bit hard out. I should stop doing it. When I write this poem, I'm like writing my little swear words, and I think I'm so cool and edgy, and then I have to read it, and I'm like, fuck my ass, and I'm like, yeah. My ancestors send me screenshots. My ancestors send me screenshots of your group chats dissecting me with all the science of your founding fathers and the sympathy of your murdering mothers, wanting to know who I am, where have I been, and who I've been with. What the fuck is a whakapapa? Do I carry it in my pussy in a tiny baggie, like a real one, like a down-ass bitch? Do I have a heart, and does it bleed like a steak if it's brutalized enough, if it's served on a plate with proper silverware and presented to your queen still beating? Would she care? Would she believe? Would she collapse into a frothing fit with the knowledge, like a prophet, like the rhythm of waves smashing up the east coast and sea? That all our cousins are locked up for growing plants on their own whenua, for putting the food into the mouths of children, for being the mouths of children themselves, with no homes, not even the bones of homes to return to. Instead, souls get trapped in subdivisions They mooch around, kick Fletcher cones, and let the air sigh out of tires, oh where, and wait for the next good day, when there is no distinction between cement and sky. And if you lie starfished at the bottom of this rock, look up and let your eyes go swimming until you realize that you are also in the clouds looking down like a god, and I see all. I'm an omniscient woman, just like my woman, and my ancestors send me screenshots. I already know what you think of me. I've known now for centuries.
This category is called Kawaio, and I'm not sure my poem should follow Tayi's poem, but anyway. This poem is called Taonga, and let's go, Taonga. When I was 10, I was obsessed with buried treasure. Not the pirate kind with X marks the spot, but the archaeology kind that tells a story of a people. I wanted to bury a time capsule with letters inside it that would say all my loves and hopes and grandiose ideas for the world. I wanted to find the longest lasting case, one that time could not erode, one that could withstand eons of churning below the topsoil. Perhaps plastic was the right choice, but at 10 I assumed metal. A cylinder, a discharged artillery shell with a watertight seal would carry me. I determined it would contain deep truth. It would reveal sadness like no other child had yet been articulate enough to share. It would speak of loss, a grief impossible for a 10-year-old person at the beginning of the 8th decade in the century of human acceleration and innovation and greed. I would not stumble over the telling of harshness in my critique of wretched humanity. But nor would I stumble in the rendering of a blossom, the skin of its petals silken with my morning breath. I would describe how the tide stretches back its lips further and further to meet the fullness of the moon, and in summer, how pippy sprout and jagged teeth from that same open mouth. I would bury my time capsule there in the moving whenua where barnacles could decorate it and salt crystals could form on its surfaces, and where only those who still knew how to dig for words would find it.
I'm going to read my newest poem, Creation Story. Yeah. Wait, have you guys seen Hot Rod? Good, it's a weird movie, you don't need to see it, it's dumb. But you know, they're like, my name's Rod and I like to party. This is like, this is like, my name's Tayi and I like to party poem. Creation Story. You can never live the same party twice, and that makes me want to cry. That makes me want to get so high that even the stars start trying it on. Searching for te kore until I'm fully gone. Now we can start again. Kick the night up from the earth and our platform boots and let the light in. This is what made me, tender like a pork bone, boiling in every situation I could barely sit in. On the flax mat, going at God for hours and hours. On the whenua, calming ruomoko while the police lasso the land. In the car outside the station, my mother dependent on his rib I had. My hands out the window, weighing the air to see if it felt like a Saturday night or a Sunday. Wondering if Dad would be let out of his cage in time to see God today. I see atua today in everything. This is what made me. Watching their descendants drop it lower than their expectations. They could never sit in our situations, which is why they can't get up and break it down like we do. And this song, made from Polynesian mystics, deceptive transformers, delivers us back to when we were down on ourselves, doing ugly little things, rolling our eyes at the singing, avoiding the sun, just as our mothers had done when their mothers spent generations powdering themselves pretty in the image of their father, ignoring both her mother and the whenua in her. I should have held my fist up then, a palm full of protest, but that's why I keep my hands up in the air now. And this fresh set of fire reminds me of how Nanny Pearl had nails so long it used to freak me out. And now I'm like, what the fuck was I even on about? And every time I see my nail tick, as an homage and an apology for every time I didn't listen, bit the apple and felt abandoned, and then abandoned me and me and me. But here we are now, created and on fire like mahuika. This is what made me, trying to weave perfect sentences, forming mountains I don't have the answers for. I'd ask my ancestors, but I'm not sure they know. All we have ever done is our best with the materials on hand, heat, water, soil, a smattering of words, and this is what made me drag myself upwards from the ocean like Panya, fresh-faced and curious. This is what made me worshipful and marvelous, able to stand upright. And some of that time I was dancing. This is what made me a duplicate of Hini Ahu One, our blood of red sand. No matter how hard we sculpt ourselves, in the end, we will always collapse back. And in the meantime, it is my friends who make me bow, get on my hands and knees for, mop their drink up from the floor, kiss their beautiful ankles. My God, you are so talented, embodied, and creative. This is what made me let down my ancestral knot, let my hips rock with all the rhythm of the wind. This party, beating and cultured in the space between the sky and the land. Get high while you can. You have traveled very far. I saw you coming in my mind, born from the last burst star.
So the first answer that came to my head to the question ko ai was ko gay mess aho. And so this is a poem, like I guess that's related to that. I don't know. So it's fiction actually. It's contemporary fiction.
Total truth.
Standing on a cold black sand beach somewhere in the future, breaking my own heart. I wonder if it was obvious to you that when I said your curls were beautiful and that you reminded me of a young Kerry Hume, that I was flirting, that I was tipping something over in my mind and calculating that 9 times out of 10 I would break down into grains of sand on a beach I've never been to, or only been to once and have no memory of because I was stuck inside my Pākehā upbringing, and 1 time out of 10, what? When you send me a message sometime later on Instagram saying you can see why I made the comparison after looking up the picture of Kerry on the beach in her jandals next to that bucket full of kai moana, a part of me hopes. Hopes for what? The tongue inside the kina shell moves against its walls and I feel a little ill with it. A thought spirals out to us and I laugh at how fast I saw a future into my pain, a patch I put on every 4 days you pick up from the table, clearly interested in what it is I am becoming, or maybe I'm just fancying that is what you are thinking because I'm fancying. You say you should read The Bone People, so I give you my copy, complete with a page torn from a notebook I used to bookmark the last 100 pages. On it, handwritten instructions from a friend that once saved my life. And I say that Kerry's work is everything, that I wish she had all of us, curly-haired takata in the 80s, to show her she wasn't an eighth of all she was all of it. Her voice now moving through all of our words, like a long line with a jawbone attached, slicing through the ocean, and an even bigger fish. And I can see us, you and I, on a beach in one of her stories, a tower burning down behind us, and me asking questions too big to answer, the rocks cold, the tide dark, and stretching back into the rest of itself.
So, kia ora koutou. We would now like to open the floor for questions. We have one more poem each that we would like to read for you, hei whakakapi, but before that, does anybody have a burning question about poetry? Or, something personal that we've shared? About Tayi's nightlife? No. Okay, so I'm going to kick us off and ask you fellas a question. We are all very different poets, clearly, with very different tone and very different, probably ways of approaching our poetry. I'm really keen to know, for you, where does your poetry sprout from?
For me? Me and Essa, or just me?
No, you and Essa.
You can answer with me if you want.
Okay, 1 second. I'm kind of free now. We'll see. It's like that game. See, we have the same answer. You got to answer? No, I don't really know. No, I think every poem is different. Like every poem has a different, seed or genesis. Honestly, I think most of the time it's just like a phrase or even like a couplet, a line. It's mainly usually sounds of image that I'll have, and I've probably maybe I've made it up or the ancestors have given it to me or I've just like picked it up from somewhere. And then it's like a matter of following it through, seeing what it is, like why it came to me, like either, trying to contextualize it or, find its place. It's like, germinating outwards from that initial idea.
Recently, I've just been writing love letters for my friends and death threats or borderline death threats for people who aren't my friends.
Are they going to be published?
In zines. You can't search them on the internet. That's my trick. I resonate with the idea of like an image, because if I get like a concept and that's what is leading me into the poem, I usually find it really hard to write the poem. But if it's an image, then I can just have a conversation with that image and it happens a lot more naturally. And then coming to poetry, is something that appeals to me about poetry is the act of questioning being like productive. Because it can, I don't know, I feel like as a kid, oftentimes your questions are responded to in ways in which feels like you shouldn't be asking them. And I feel like poetry is a really nice space for questions. Yeah.
Kia ora. There's a really long history of poetry in Te Ao Māori, if we go all the way back, the motiatia, our poetic, our kaitito who composed many forms of poetry as well. With thinking about that long whakapapa of poetry and the resurgence of poetry we're sort of seeing now, especially amongst Māori writers, why do you think that's happening and how do you think that's, what is the impact of that? What are we doing? We're going for it. It's a really straightforward question, right?
What was the question?
What? Poetry's experiencing a resurgence for Māori. Pihi o whakaaro.
I guess that's like
it is.
a tide we've been lifted by, right?
Nah, honestly, because I feel like, bash my teeth out with the mic. Nah, honestly, because I feel like when Essa and I did the MA together in 2017, and before that it was a bit on the quiet side, I reckon. There wasn't, so maybe it was me. What is it? I don't know. What do you reckon now?
Our population's increasing.
Yeah, we're all having pippies. No.
They're having more
Not me,
children
though.
than white people are.
Oh, real?
Yeah.
Happy days.
Next poem is coming about that.
We're a younger population as well. That's why universities are trying to appeal to us.
Oh, really? What, the MA programs?
Yeah. They put nice murals on their buildings and then fire the Māori teachers.
Oh, yes.
Not getting political.
What do you reckon now?
I think there's lots of reasons. I think poetry, there's a long history of poetry, but not only that. People often think that poetry is quick or accessible or easy, and it's none of those things because it's distilled, its ideas distilled down into, really, really deliberate words. And I don't think it's easy at all, but what I do think is happening is that the speed at which the world is changing and the increase of the global ways in which we can communicate, for me, what's happening is that poetry is a way to express relationship, and it's a way to express relationship en masse, many kinds of relationship. There's not a correct way. And what we need really more than ever is ways to understand the huge amount of diversity that people are experiencing and the huge amount of questioning they're experiencing and the relationships they've got to the world around them. I think poetry is doing that. And I think that because it's also a short read potentially as opposed to an essay, it's more palatable online. So, are there any questions? Kia ora.
Yeah, pretty much. I wanted to write since I was like little as, like probably 7 or 8, and then poetry came to me like more like teenage years. But yeah, I was very, very adamant that this is what I would do when I got big. Yeah.
Yes, same, I guess. It's like a cheap hobby.
Well, yeah, see.
Like, you need, like, you already have exercise books because your parents bought them because you're going to school, and you have a pen because you're going to school. And so, yeah, you could create whole things that, you might not have had access to in other ways. Like, I remember... Yeah, like looking at like friends playing like certain video games or something and just being like, oh, I can't do that, but I can like write fantastical things. And yeah, in teenage years, I became quite interested in poetry. I think, yeah, and because I read his Dark Materials by Philip Pullman, and that's very influenced by Paradise Lost, so that's how I got into poetry, was through old white shit. Yeah, and then I haven't really thought about doing anything else, which is...
So, Carl, no, I didn't ever plan to be a poet. I did always write poetry, but I had the very clear instructions, both from my whānau and from my internal understanding that would be an entire waste of my life. And I would just be, like, why? So my father said to me, oh, what are you going to do at university? And I was like, philosophy. And he's like, oh, God. And so then when I said, oh, actually, I'm going to be a poet, he was even more impressed. So I didn't want to. I wanted to be a singer. I did. I'm terrible. I wanted to be a singer and an actor and a director and all of these things. And actually what I do all the time and what I always did and what lived under my bed in a shoebox was poetry. One more question.
Can I ask?
2 more questions.
I just, I don't know if you said it or if I just missed it, Anahera, but I wondered where your poetry springs from.
I didn't say it. Mostly anger, if I'm to be honest. Mostly I get super fucked off and then I write a poem. It actually comes from everywhere, and all the poetry is different. The collection here, Sedition, is at 20 years worth of poetry, but it wasn't ready to be put together in a collection until it was. And so, when I say where does it spring from, actually sometimes the poems that are in here have basically arrived fully formed, and at other times I have had to, bash at them a lot of times, go back and forth to see if there was something there that was trying to be articulated. So many different sources, not just an image, not one single way potentially, pretty much everywhere, but more often than not, my poetry springs from relationship. I have a relationship with something that I need to articulate or understand, and that is where my poetry springs from. Gildea.
I just wanted to know what each of your journeys to publishing your poetry was. This morning Linda talked about secret writers, and I think poetry is probably, most of us probably are secret poets and maybe have no desire to ever be published, but maybe what were your reasons for why you chose to or were chosen to publish your works?
Publishing why? How? Well, when I was a teenager and I was writing my poems, I would like self-publish them a lot on the internet, on like Wattpad and Tumblr and things like that. And I had my little following and thought I was real cool. yeah, oh my God, forget it. It was fucking disgusting. So I posted
I'm
myself.
going to sit between these two next time.
I published, a lot online. And then what happened? Yeah, and I did the masters in creative writing and wrote my book, and then I won the prize at the end of the year for like best manuscript. It's like so evil that they do that, but and then that just like kind of honestly put me on the fast track because I got attention from like different publishers and stuff, and I just got approached and said, yeah, you can have my book, and that's been it. Yeah. But as to why, and why I chose a traditional publishing route as well, because I'm with big publishers here and overseas especially. I like the traditional publishing route because I just take care of a lot of things for you. There's if you're going to self-publish, there's lots of aspects that you have to consider, distribution, cover, making the book design, typesetting. There's so many things, and I'm not going to do any of that personally. So yeah, and I really wanted. I've always been really focused on getting published and wanting to have a book because I just want people to read it.
I guess, yeah, my life goal for, ever since I was young was to have, a book published. And so I was like, what the fuck is the rest of my life going to be when the first book came out? But, a lot of it had to do with, encouragement from friends and people I look up to. So, most of my poetry was, because when I would text my friends in high school, half the thing would be a random poem, and then half would be, whatever the conversation was. And most of my friends were okay with it. Some of them were like, what the fuck is that first bit? I'm like, I'm sorry. And then I ended up going to university because I wanted to be a teacher. And then I did a creative writing paper as, a whim. And then the lecturer there, Tracy Slaughter, was really encouraging of my work. And so I think that was the start of putting the work into the world as something that was valuable. Yeah, and now I just see it as all of us are building a culture that, can't be extinguished.
Kia ora. I have a very different story about my journey to publishing. I was very resistant to publishing. Over and over again, I'm quite resistant to people telling me what to do. So there were several, there were 3 offers from different publishers to publish a collection, all of which I didn't want. And my work wasn't ready anyway, but I was just I don't know why, I don't want that. I don't have any desire to sell the work. I just didn't have it inside me. And so, but I wrote it all the time, and I really wanted to open the way for others who wanted to write and publish. I really wanted to be somebody who could help pry open those doors and hold them open in all of the work that I was doing. And so what happened was I was asked to read a poem it's a couple of poems at an event in Wellington in Pōneke, and I did that. And because I had to do that, I had to message Auntie Moi, kia ora Auntie Moi if you're watching, at the marae and say, I'm going to be late, because I was supposed to be at a whānau hui at our marae. And I was like, I'm going to be late. And she was like, how come? And I'm like, I've got to read poetry at an event. She was like, okay, girl, yep, ka pai, see you as soon as you're finished then. So I turn up, and it's just after kai. Everyone's finished their kai, everyone's in the whare kai. She's like, Anahera, where have you been? And I was like, I've been, shut up. I've been at the National Library reading poetry. And she's like, oh, well, we want to hear what you read. And I was like, oh, no, you don't. She was like, oh, yeah, we do. Yeah, we're all here. We had our kai. Off you go. And I was like, shit. And so I did, how can you say no? So I read the poems, but, it was really interesting. And conversation ensued. And what she said to me afterwards, out on the back veranda where we're having our kai paipa, she said, where's your book? I was like, oh, I don't have a book. I don't want a book. And she's like, well, how the fuck am I going to read it then? You better get me a book. That's how I came to publish. We have no more time for questions. Thank you so much, everyone. But what we will do, just really quickly, is each of us will just read you a purupuraki poem. Kia ora.
Kia ora. This poem is called Echidna and Her Bird Tongue for Jem Wilder. It starts with the sound of birds when she is barely awake, the world reminding her it's there in the best way possible. Papatua Nuku reaching into her dreams and laying her bare. It is so simple. Just listen. We got our language from feathers and flight. Just listen. We got our language from the nests and the trees. Kuranai tuku, flying backwards out of the geothermal pools, completely intact, ready to teach that boy, Hatupatu, how to put together a sentence.
Hawaii. My mother, tired from pregnancy and being alive, named her last son Hawaii, like the paradise. Some people say it is where we go when we die. They say we dive straight off the edge of Cape Ringa and into the point where the sky hangs so heavy with spirits that it touches the sea. Other people say that that is where we were before we came here by waka or whale, or perhaps that was where we were before there was anything at all, where we meant something before we discovered, like Eve, God's forbidden fruit in the shape of an eye. I think it must be a womb, where everything is born and returns to. Life and death are the colour red. They are the colour of a cosmic heartbeat rising on his fresh baby flesh, pinched between fingers and kissed.
This poem is my only rhyming poem, and it's really a call to arms. So all of you there with your poems under your beds and in your shoeboxes and back pockets and at the bottom of your sack-like handbags, because that's me, please get them out. This poem is called Entreaty. Entreaty. I am the maiden native born who dug her toes in the wet sand, whose seashell collections filled her hand, and the breeze blew through her inky hair, down her back without a care, before there was a house that Jack built. I am the maiden native born who married a man making his way, though the elders frowned on it back in the day. They signed on paper, making friends with the crown, shaping the house that Jack built. I am the maiden all forlorn who hears the phrases seventh generation say, like, I'm not responsible for things back in the day. Those bloody Maoris get handouts because they're brown. So in the name of safekeeping, it's all owned by the crown here in the house that Jack built. I am the maiden all forlorn who marched and picketed in front of her accusers with legs that buckle and a back that bruises, so all the children I might bear can walk head high without fear to navigate the house that Jack built. I am the maiden all forlorn, raised and educated in our civilised nation, who got a degree in politicisation from the blankets and muskets repeatedly thrown as clever accusations by a colonial clone, knocking at the house that Jack built. I am the maiden, New Zealand born, who walks through the tamaki that Auckland erases, with hundreds of people laying claim to these spaces, whose mother taught her not to be racist, while her friends call her Sal to tell her the latest. We're dismantling the house that Jack built. Kia ora.
Thank you. What a fabulous way to finish this session. Thank you. It's great to hear you reading the poems. A lot of those I've read, and it's much better hearing them read, and we can read them again with new insights. So thank you all. Thank you all for coming, and thanks for a fabulous panel. And finally, I'd just like to say this is our last event for Kupu 2023. It's been a great week, and we've had some great panellists over the week. And I think when you think Kupu was set up to have a whole range of Māori voices, in all our diversity and all our shades and colour, and it's been great. I think we have certainly accomplished that, so thank you. I'd like to thank all the readers and participants, the panellists, who have shared their stories and their lives and their work so frankly and freely and honestly, and it's been great. And I think I'd also like to thank the audience, who I think the idea of Kupu is having an audience that can relate to the work of the writers. And I think it just gives a different vibe, and it gives us all an opportunity to share in a way that we can't do at other festivals. So thank you all. Thank you to the panellists. Thank you to the audience. And I'll hand over to Rangitihi. Kia ora tātou.